Tears fell uncontrollably from Betlana's eyes as she held on to the lifeless and lacerated remains of her sister. Most of Jenna's limbs were torn away from her torso, while blood oozed out of the countless wounds and gashes grazing her body. Her eyes were wide open and appeared soulless, while the rest of her once vivacious face was maimed and distorted. Orphelus's corpse lay at a little distance in a similar condition, one of his eye sockets devoid of a pupil. The Thraklovs had been imprisoned in their cages once again, and the few people that had gathered to witness the heinous lynching had returned to their homes. There was no one around to listen to Betlana's howls and whimpers of unimaginable misery and woe. Once news of Jenna's dreadful demise had reached her, she abandoned the temporary sanctuary she had found in the tree hut and scurried through the forest at lightning speed, hoping against all hope to somehow find her sister alive. She left Kellue behind as she did not want to endanger or risk his life. All her hopes dissipated when her eyes fell upon Jenna's butchered dead body. She collapsed upon the ground and pulled her to her chest, holding her tight, trying to will her back to life. Seconds turned into minutes, and minutes converged into hours, but Betlana did not move. It wasn't until darkness had descended upon the gory and blood-spattered ground that Betlana gathered the remains of Jenna's body and carried them deep into the Hovington forest until she reached a stretch of clear land. She laid her sister's remains on the ground and drew a dagger from under her jet-black robes. With the blade, she cut across Jenna's already slashed chest. More blood seeped out as Betlana dug her long fingers into the open cut and pulled out her sister's heart. Slowly, she moved the organ closer to her mouth and bit a large chunk. Her stomach upturned as her guts threatened to spill out in projectile vomit. However, she continued to eat. She devoured Jenna's heart while tears streaked her face. Later on, she decapitated Jenna with the same dagger. She wrapped her skull in a white cloth, which immediately turned red due to the trickling blood, and buried the rest of the body in front of a huge oak tree. As painful as the process was, these were the dictated customs of her people. She marked Jenna's grave with a distinctive rock and adorned it with arresting white chrysanthemums. Afterward, she once again journeyed toward the site of execution. Even though she barely knew him, she carried Orphelus's remnants to the same clearing and gave him a similar burial, refusing to let his body rot disgracefully. She sat near the graves until the first rays of morning light chanced upon her swollen face and bloodshot eyes. Her grief turned into rage, and an unquenchable thirst for revenge and retribution consumed her soul. She wanted payback. She needed it more than her next breath. Throughout the night, she had involuntarily devised a plan of action. It was crystal clear in her mind what needed to be done. She went back to Kellue, who was still hidden inside the tree hut where she had left him. When she entered the mossy cabin, she found him wide awake, awaiting her return. There was no way in which she could have softened the blow of the incident. The pain of losing a parent could not be alleviated or dampened. Her heart broke into a million pieces as she told Kellue about the tragedy that had traversed. She spared him the gory details of the occurrence. However, she made sure that he was well aware of the perpetrators. She hugged him tight while he wailed and whimpered. Even though he was only a child, he felt the loss he had sustained to the utmost degree. For the first time, he considered himself to be a stranger in this world, truly alone and forsaken. Betlana unwrapped the cloth from Jenna's head and placed it in front of Kellue. "If you hold this skull in your hands," she told him, "Jenna will hear your words from beyond the grave. You can talk to her any time you want." Kellue, however, was unable to voice out even a single coherent sentence. Instead, he continued sobbing uncontrollably. Betlana and Kellue vacated the hut around midday and traveled back home, where Betlana assembled a small army of mercenaries. Without wasting any time, she visited the underground world of illegal and criminal actions and activities. She recruited a group of skilled soldiers of fortune to attack the house of Corvus and free Kris from his captivity in the dungeons. Since Corvus was a feared man, and his name instilled panic and dread among the hearers, The mercenaries were skeptical at first. However, they agreed to the task after Betlana assured them they would be compensated with 200 pieces of gold after the work concluded. Together, they marched toward Larone City and attacked the estate captured by the crime lord. The attack above ground acted as a diversion and distraction for the extrication transpiring below. Before striking the place, they made sure that Corvus was inside. They managed to make their way into the building despite their small numbers. The mercenaries were adept and expert at combat, and therefore they murdered a significant number of Yakvan's men. Corvus, however, managed to escape in time. Once they had infiltrated the palace, a group of 5 mercenaries immediately started moving toward the dungeons, where Kris was being held hostage. It took a great deal of effort to locate the passage that led to the underground prison. The brick tunnel was unilluminated and gloomy, the darkness densifying with every step they took. Fortunately, the dungeon was unguarded, as all of the lookouts had rushed above to fight the invaders. The men swiftly made their way to the cell where Kris was held hostage and used a huge quantity of Leffel dust to blow the door off its hinges. Kris barely had time to register their arrival before one of the men hit him in the head with a gigantic mallet. He dropped to the ground, rendered unconscious. None of the invaders noticed Mabiopsa in the corner as they carried Kris out, distributing his weight among one another. Once they were outside, they threw him over the back of a muscular brown horse before climbing onto different horses themselves. The animals neighed as the men whipped them sharply, commanding them to proceed in the direction of the forest. Betlana had not joined the onslaught. Instead, she had waited for Kris's return outside the tree hut, with Kellue inside. The mercenaries returned with a knocked-out Kris just a little while before the crack of the next day's dawn. They unloaded Kris from the horse's back and threw him upon the muddy ground. Billis, the leader of the small group of mercenaries, stepped forward. "Here's your man. Now, pay up," he addressed Betlana. "Very well," Betlana remarked as she pulled out a bag of gold coins from under her robe and threw it upon the ground near Billis's feet. 200 gold coins, as promised. Now leave me with this fool. Billis bent down and picked up the bag. He tossed it in the air a few times, weighing it in his hands. "Where did you get all this gold?" he asked. "I used to have a friend," Betlana replied, looking at Kris. "He helped me lay my hands on a lot of zeolite. That's before he turned out to be a complete disappointment, of course." "That's a shame," Billis interjected. "Do you know what else is a shame?" Betlana looked at him with an inquiring expression, her eyebrows arched. "It's a shame that me and my men will have to go into hiding for at least a few months now. Corvus is a dangerous man. We cannot risk exposure. It is going to cost us a load of work. Don't you think you should do something to ease our troubles?" Billis hinted. "What do you want, Billis?" Betlana asked straightforwardly. "I want more gold," he answered. Betlana hesitated but threw down another 100 gold coins simply to get the ruthless mercenaries off her back. She did not want to waste more crucial time. However, Billis's greed was still not satisfied. "This is still not enough," he sneered after counting his earnings. Betlana was beginning to lose her patience. She took a step forward, indicating the fact that she was neither afraid nor intimidated by the murderous soldiers collected at her doorstep. "I have given you more than what we bargained for, simply because I do not have the time or the energy to indulge in a wasteful argument with you and your men. I have just lost my only sister, a brave soul, to a hopeless battle that was doomed for failure since the beginning. All owing to the poor planning of a man whom I should never have trusted in the first place. So, believe me when I say that I have had a long couple of days, and I don't wish to be harassed by the likes of you. Accept this money and take your leave," she finished. "My condolences for your loss, but I'm not leaving this place until you give me and my men an additional 500 pieces of gold each," Billis rasped as he slowly bared his sword. "Or what?" Betlana challenged, earning wild laughter from the men. or I will murder this man who I just helped free. Then I will butcher the kid who was just peeking outside of your tree hut. I will save you for the end, of course, but don't worry. I won't kill you before I and my men have had our fair share of fun," he mocked wickedly as his men snickered. However, the smiles were wiped off their faces when they registered Betlana's reaction. She did not appear even a little bit scared or fazed by Billis's threat. Instead, she simply sighed as he raised her open hand toward the sky. In a flash, a long staff appeared out of thin air, clasped between her outstretched fingers. Before Billis had time to react, Betlana struck the ground with her staff, sending him flying backward, where he collapsed upon the mud-spattered ground. His men stayed rooted to their spots, shocked and dumbfounded. The very next second, a large centipede, the size of a bulky cow, creeped out from the dense forest trees, followed by several humongous thraklovs. They came to a halt by Betlana's side, acting as a barrier between her and the mercenaries. The blood of all men in the clearing ran cold as they quivered and trembled with fear, their eyes stretched wide as their mouths hung open with horror. They knew that the vicious beasts could end their lives in a matter of mere seconds. They wanted to flee the scene instantaneously. However, even drawing another breath felt like a daunting challenge. "If you run now," Betlana called out in a booming voice that seemed to echo through the open space, "I will spare your lives. Not only will I let you live, but I will also allow you to keep the gold that I already gave you." She did not have to repeat her words, as the men did not need to be told twice. They swiveled around on their heels and ran for their lives. Betlana finally turned her attention to Kris. She once again hit her staff onto the ground, lighter than before, and a jolt of current traversed across Kris's body, jerking him back to consciousness. When he opened his eyes, he saw Betlana's silhouette towering over him. "Wake up, Lord Kris," she uttered mockingly. "Wake up!" Betlana was once again fuming with uncontrollable and irrepressible rage. Her figure quivered with anger as Kris sat up straighter, trying to make sense of his surroundings. There was a throbbing and blinding ache in the back of his head, and even the meek morning light flowing through the cracks in between the tree branches disturbed his eyes. "You lied to me!" Betlana bellowed. "You are the reason my sister is dead!" Kris tried to comprehend the meaning behind her words. "Me?" he questioned in a gravelly voice. "Yes. You're the reason I buried my sister with my own hands. You're the reason that a 9-Aniar-old boy lost his mother. Kellue is an orphan because of you, Kris, or should I say, Andreas." Kris stood up slowly on trembling legs. "What do you mean? I don't understand," he asked, truly bewildered by Betlana's reaction and her words. "Oh, you don't understand? What part of this conversation is beyond your comprehension? You lied to me and Jenna. She trusted you, and look where it got her, 6 feet under the bloody ground." "How can you say that?" Kris asked, hurt and disappointment evident in his expression. "What else do you want me to say? It is your fault, Kris. It's all your fault. You betrayed us," Betlana spat. "Do you think I wished for this to happen? Do you think I wanted Jenna to die? Do you think I wanted to watch my son's flesh being ripped to shreds by those evil creatures?" Kris yelled as anger surged through his veins. He had not expected this reaction from Betlana. He could not believe that she was blaming him for this devastating tribulation. "I don't care about what you want. The only thing I care about is making sure that the murderers of my sister get what they deserve, and I'm not afraid of going to any and every length to ensure that. If I have to burn the whole world to get her justice, then that's what I will do, starting with you." Betlana had a vicious gleam in her eyes. Her expression was wild and feral. Kris took a step back. "What are you talking about?" he asked carefully. Betlana did not answer. "If you wanted me to suffer and die, why did you get me out of that dungeon? Why didn't you just leave me there to rot?" Kris continued to question. "The only reason I got you out of that dungeon is to kill you with my own hands," she screamed. "You sound like a mad woman," Kris remarked, shaking his head. "Oh, you would sound like a mad person too, if you ever had to devour the heart of a loved one." "What are you talking about?" I had to rip out Jenna's heart from her body and I had to consume it, she told Kris, whose eyes widened with horror. What? He asked. Why on earth would you do that? It's a ritual dictated by my traditions. An organ as vital as the heart cannot be buried in the ground. It cannot be put to waste in that manner. It needs to be ingested, crammed down one's throat. Her voice broke, and for the first time in the last couple of days, she showed an ounce of weakness. I have spent my whole life within these grounds, and I have never heard of such a tradition. How can that be possible? Kris inquired, perplexed. It is possible because I am not an ordinary human being like you. What's that supposed to mean? On some level, you certainly suspected that I was different from most other women, didn't you? She professed. Jenna would never have indulged in dark jaduri or any kind of sorcery, even as a last resort. You know that, Betlana. Yes, I know that, but she also would not have joined the fight with you if she had known you were lying about your identity. You don't know that, Kris muttered quietly. Oh yes, I do. You never told us that you were a lord, Kris. You never told us about your status in society. You never informed us regarding the fact that you were the very person whom Yakvon dethroned. By making us join forces with you, you put a target on all of our backs. That's not true, Betlana. I only wanted what was best for everyone, Kris said, looking down at the ground. Do you think that bastard Corvus would have fed my sister to the Thraklovs if she wasn't acquainted with you? If she was a part of the usual townsfolk, her life would have been spared. They would have let her live. And what kind of a life would that have been? All I ever wanted was the happiness of my people. I wished for them to lead lives full of liberty and freedom. I wanted to save them from Yakvon's cruelty. But you failed, Betlana screamed once more. And now you will pay the price. What do you mean? Kris asked. I told you what I mean, Kris, she said slowly, as she drew a dagger from under her robe, the same blade that she used to cut out Jenna's heart. I'm going to kill you, and once you are dead, I will feast on your heart. Kris took a few immediate steps back. You need to calm down, Betlana. Don't do anything that you might end up regretting later, he warned her. I could never regret avenging my sister. I'm going to murder you, and then Corvus will meet the same fate. It is not me who is responsible for Jenna's death. You need to understand that. We have the same enemies. Let's work together, please. I am done working with you. I beg you, let me help. Let me live, and I promise that I will finish Corvus for you. Trust me when I say that no one despises that piece of filth more than me. You have lost your sister, Betlana, and I understand your pain. But I have lost everything. My wife, my daughter, my son, all of them are dead because of Yakvon and his men, including Corvus. Why should I trust you? Just let me kill Corvus for you. Allow me to play my part in avenging Jenna. Help me in lightening the burden that has been torturing and tormenting my soul. I cannot bear the weight of this colossal tragedy. Betlana stared right into Kris's tear-filled eyes. While her anger was far from dissipating, she lowered her knife. Only on one condition, she said. Anything, Kris promised. This time around, I'll be the one making the plan. All right, Kris agreed. After a few long and stressful seconds, Betlana turned around and entered the hut. Kris followed her inside. He immediately regretted this action when his eyes fell upon Jenna's severed head, displayed on the table in the middle of the room. He took a step back. What is that? He questioned, aghast and dismayed. That's another tradition, Betlana told him quietly. We can reach out to our loved ones even after death through their skulls. If we talk to them, they can hear us. She moved toward one corner of the congested room and returned with Orphelus's polished skull in her hands. Tears formed in Kris's eyes as he looked at his son's deformed face. If you talk to your son with his skull in your hands, he will be able to hear you from even beyond the grave, Betlana told Kris. Kris extended his shaking hands to take hold of Orphelus's skull at a snail's pace. He looked at his face closely, and tears flowed from his eyes. He stepped out of the tree hut and placed himself on one of the front steps. His eyes fell upon the 2 Thraklovs stationed outside to guard him. Their job was to make sure Kris did not escape or run away. However, there was something different about these birds. They appeared to be more like large eagles than ravens. They had white bald heads and brownish feathers. Their talons were long, sharp, and clean. In a way, these Thraklovs weren't as eerie or sinister as Yakvon's monsters. Kris raised his head upward toward the sky and stared at the twin moons, Zolina, the largest moon, and Riku, the smaller moon. Zolina was waxing gibbous, while Riku was nearly full. He spent a long time gazing at the sky with his son's skull in his hands. "I wish that I had said this when you were still here by my side, my boy," he began. "But I know that if you had been there, you would have done everything in your power to protect your mother and your sister. I wish I hadn't blamed you. It was wrong and unjust of me to hold you responsible for playing any sort of part in their deaths. I should have forgiven you when you were still alive. I hope that my forgiveness means something to your resting spirit, and that you can maybe perhaps one day forgive me."